If you're not listening to the Smoke World podcast, you're wasting your time, you mortal.
What's up, folks? Welcome to another episode of Smoke World. I'm your host, Stone. So we'll go grab that stick, go grab a glass, whatever you're drinking. Let's sit back and have that conversation. You can follow me on Instagram at Smoke World Podcast and the email stone@smokeworldpodcast.com and this lovely website, smokeworldpodcast.com is the website. Today, we are blessed with my brother Vincent from Vicente Blends Cigars. He's the owner, and he has a very unique product based on the fact that price point might not be for everybody. Let's just keep it real. The price point may not be for everybody, but nonetheless, his product, he stands by his product. So, without further ado, because brother Vincent takes the interview and he runs with it. So I'll check you out on the other side. All right, folks, I have my brother of the leaf, Vincent from Vicente Blends. Brother, welcome to Smoke World. How you doing today, brother?
Good, man. How about yourself?
Oh, no complaints, bro. No complaints. Okay, so what I like to do for my listeners, we try to get to know our guests. So we're going to talk about where you from, bro. Talk to us.
I'm originally from the Philadelphia area. I grew up out in the suburbs, past King of Prussia, but I spent, I went to Drexel University, so I lived in West Philly. Like I lived 38th in Lancaster for, 4 years, 5 years. And then I spent a lot of time in the South Philadelphia area. I'm an engineer by education, so there used to be an old Sunoco refinery there. It's no longer there. I think they're tearing it down. But yeah, man, I'm a, good old Philly boy.
Oh man. Now you said you're engineer by education. Yeah. I like how you said that. How you said that. Okay. So how did you get into this path? Now, obviously you've been smoking cigars for some time. Now, how long has that been?
Man, so, I've been doing a lot of podcasts and IG lives, and it's pretty cool where, these questions were coming at me. I was like, oh shit, like I got to go back and, I'm 52, man, and I feel like I'm like 18, and I'm like, it wasn't that long ago, and I'm like, oh my God, it was a long time ago. So yeah, where my true cigar journey started, I was living in Bangkok, Thailand, and this was, 23 years ago. Where I own some tech companies, and so there was from 1999 to like 2006, 2007. I had a home in Bangkok, Thailand, and a home in Hyderabad, India, as well as the Philadelphia area. So, my cigar journey really started in Bangkok. Prior to that, I would smoke cigars every now and then, going out with friends and things of that nature, but really, it started in Bangkok, and I think it was kind of out of boredom, and so where I lived, so there was a street or an avenue in Bangkok, Thailand called Sukhumvit, and I lived right off of that particular avenue. That's kind of like Sukhumvit's kind of like the Broadway of Bangkok, real happening place, busy restaurants, bars all over the place. Well, there was a Marriott there, and they had this. I'm assuming it's still there. I haven't been back to Bangkok since probably like 15 years or so. But they had this incredible lobby bar with a piano. And every day from like 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., they would have someone playing a piano. But also they had this huge humidor that was filled with Cubans, and that was it, all Cubans, right? So every day I found myself going in there, grabbing a martini and having a Cuban, and I did that for years. And it's funny looking back and looking at the blends that I've created. I didn't intentionally try to make them like a Cubanesque flavor, But after I was, I started to, I had to answer all these questions from everybody. And what I realized was, for the last 5 years that I've been actually working on this project, I've been in the weeds, right? I've just been doing my own thing, focusing. But I guess looking back, yeah, man, my journey started in Bangkok, and I was one of those kind of Cuban maximalists and purists. But I was very naive, right? I mean, I was a young guy in Bangkok. Luckily I did well for myself where I could travel. And I remember sitting there at times, just looking around, and I was, what was I? I was like my late 20s, early 30s, thinking like I made it in life, right? But little did I know I still had 60 years of my life to go. But yeah, that's where my true cigar journey started.
Okay, so now
Bangkok,
right now I'm telling you right now, you're different, brother. Okay, Bangkok.
Yeah.
You did say Bangkok. Okay,
Yes.
a guy from the Philadelphia area living in Bangkok. So this wasn't even a group effort where you had a group of guys.
No.
The old story is always, yeah, a couple of my buddies were sitting around and we got some cigars. This was a solo venture.
Yeah, I had a friend. Yep, I had a friend of mine that had moved over there, and I'll tell you, the first time I went to Bangkok and I went to Thailand, I hated it, and I'm like, get me the hell out of this place, because being from Philly, man, you don't like people in your space. I don't like people in my space. Like, I don't care if you're cool. I don't care if you're the most beautiful woman. Like, I have to invite you into my personal space. And the culture is very different. Amazing culture. Then I went back a second and third time, and I was like, you know what? All right. And then the culture really, really grew on me. And it's probably the culture that really was the beginning of like saving my life, just because it's such a laid back culture. Everything is relaxed. And being from Philly, we're in high gear all the time.
Yes, sir.
And it was the first time in my life I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, why is everything moving so slow?
Man, see, now this is interesting, brother. So we're going to start from that point there. So you started your love of cigars in Bangkok. Now we move fast forward.
Yep.
At what point? Now you say you're engineer by trade and education. So at what point did you decide to say, you know what? Damn, I think I can make a cigar. I can do this.
Yeah.
What was that thought process, brother?
So I left Bangkok, and I graduated Drexel University, 1993, top of my class, valedictorian. And this is all before Bangkok. So I was acting as an engineer for the first few parts of my life. But the problem is, I at a young age, I needed something more. And that's when I realized that was kind of the beginning of my serial entrepreneurship, where I was always willing to risk everything to make something grand or just fail monumentally, right? There is no in between in my mind. So I left Bangkok. I left Bangkok in India because I was tired of traveling. I mean, I think at one point I was doing maybe 100,000 miles a year between Philly, Bangkok, Hyderabad, India, back to Bangkok, back to Hyderabad. So I came back to the Philly area for about, I don't even know how long, 7 years, 5, 6, 7 years. And I decided to come to the Dominican Republic to help support my one of my tech companies. So I came down to the Dominican 10 years ago and fell in love with the culture here. I mean, the culture here is absolutely incredible. I mean, it's a love-hate relationship with me because it's still a very slow culture. So still being a Philly guy in my DNA, man, like when you got to move fast here, it just doesn't work, right? So I'm in the Dominican, and let me take a step back. When I came back to the U.S. from Bangkok, I wasn't smoking that many cigars. Number one, Cubans were hard to get a hold of. There wasn't that many boutiques out there because you still had all the incumbents, the Fuentes, the Davidoffs, the Macanudos, and things like that, or the companies like that. And it's not that I didn't like them. I just, my priorities changed, and I wasn't smoking a cigar every day. So I come to the Dominican 10 years ago, and everywhere you look down here, man, like this is a cigar culture, right? And everywhere I would go, whether it was a corner colmado or you go to, a beautiful restaurant down here, all the restaurants pretty much have terraces outside, and I see people smoking. And at the time, right before I came to Dominican, that's where Pennsylvania, most of the U.S. became smoke-free, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, man, I'm down here, and I remember walking in to a restaurant, and I pulled out a cigar, and the waiters came up to me and put a cigar ashtray on the table, and I'm like, what the hell is going on down here? This is fucking amazing, right? So yeah, and then as the years went, I started tasting a lot of Dominican tobacco, a lot of unknown brands, very small shops, like rolling on certain street corners and things like that. And a lot of the tobacco is very good, and it started to remind me of the Cuban cigars, And then about 5-6 years ago, I found myself, demanding a cigar every day. And I just put a video out on my Instagram, and it was about meditation for me, right? Because it was the only time in my life that I could sit down for an hour, hour and a half. I could put my feet up and chill, whether I had a cigar, Pellegrino or a martini or rum or something. And I found myself, it was the only time in my life I could relax, right? So then what happened was I found myself, as I'm addicted to that like hour and a half of relaxation, I found myself getting really disenchanted with a lot of cigars in the market because they're too hard to draw. And I just started getting angry. Like, I found myself getting angry. I'm like, what the fuck is, like, why is this thing so hard to draw, And then one day I just had it. I said, you know what? Being an engineer, I'm going to dig into this and I'm going to figure out why. And I may just try to do this myself. And that's what happened, man. So 5 years ago, I ventured with a small boutique company that is still today remains unknown. I haven't disclosed who I use. But with me being an engineer, I got tired of asking people, well, why does the cigar burn that way, and why is the cigar hard to draw? Why do you put so much filler in it? And nobody gave me the answer that I required, which was more like a mathematical answer. Like my mind is pure mathematics. It just runs numbers all the time, 24 hours a day. And I'm like, this is crazy. Like, the answers that I'm getting is, well, that's the way we do it. And I'm like, well, that's not the answer I want. I want something deeper. And I just couldn't get the answer. So I ventured with this small boutique company, and I have a great relationship with them, and they agreed to let me in the house, inside their house. And I said, listen, I need to start this from ground zero. Don't fucking teach me anything. I'm going to start from the ground level up, and I'm just going to ask questions, And that's pretty much what I did. And so the culmination of my product today is basically 5 years of work. I've been blending and constructing cigars for 5 years. And we bring a very unique perspective to the industry that I'm just not sure that the appreciation for it is there yet. We're slowly growing, right? And yeah, so do you want me to go into how I started constructing the cigars and why?
Hell yeah, because I got to ask this question. So are you a mechanical engineer by trade and education?
No, I have 2 engineering degrees. One is civil and the other one is architectural structural engineering. Okay,
gotcha. That's put people in place. Okay, so now you said you didn't want them to show you anything. You were going to ask questions and start from ground zero.
Yep.
So now let's start from that point. So You're telling me you're going to start rolling cigars. Are you obviously you're watching what's going on, and you're thinking, okay, because of how your mind works, you're like, okay,
right.
I'm watching this and putting things together. So let's take it from that point, Vince.
All right, cool. So basically, the agreement that I had with this particular boutique was that once I learn and once I try to master the technique, I'm going to have my own rollers here and I'm going to train them, right? Which is very unique to the industry and other manufacturers. Okay.
Come down. You throwing a bomb in this thing, bro. I'm just letting
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, man. So really, what I first started off with, I started cutting cigars open. I started cutting them open and looking at the patterns and all kinds of crazy shit. And luckily, I had a dear friend of mine who's Dominican that grew up in the U.S., so he was my right-hand man here. So, I mean, it took months, man, and we would roll cigars. I'm like, well, why are you doing that? Well, that's the way it's done. No, I don't want to fucking hear that. Like, don't tell me that's the way it's done. Like, why are you doing that? Why are you doing it that way? You know? And then what happened was what I realized is that nobody, now when I say nobody, it is the severe minority of cigar manufacturers out there, and there are a few. Nobody weighs the tobacco prior to rolling the cigar and pressing, right? The thing that is amazing about these rollers is they can literally feel the weight with their hands. That's what a true, I don't like this term, but that's what a true master roller can do, right? They can literally feel the weight of the tobacco with their hands, not to mention how they roll it and they can, bunch the leaves and things like that. So I start kind of pulling leaves out, and they're like, yo, what the hell are you doing? I'm like, just fucking roll the thing, will you? Like, just please do what I ask. I'm not trying to just do what I ask, you know? So what I did is I said, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to start weighing the tobacco before the cigar is pressed. And that's what I did, right? So even before I was blending, I started rolling the cigars. And we were rolling cigars at like half-gram increments. And a half-gram of tobacco is, if you have like a normal-sized hand, a half-gram is about 3/4 the size of your palm.
Okay.
So I rolled cigars in half-gram increments just to see how it affected the draw. So I went from like really loose to really tight. So what I did is I wanted to make sure that I had a cigar that had a phenomenal draw. It's not like everybody that smoked our cigars, everybody's eyes light up because they've never had a cigar with that phenomenal of a draw. It's a very open draw, you know? And that's basically what happened. So after a while of rolling the cigars, and I didn't care about the leaves we were using, I didn't care about any of that. I wanted to master the draw first. It was even to the point where when we would bunch the tobacco, each different leaf, and we have an Allure leaf, we have a Seiko leaf, and we have a Ligero leaf, right? When on each leaf, I went to the art store one day down here and I got different colored pieces of like paper. And I would cut the paper in strips, and every time that they would put one of the leaves in, I would put, let's say they had the Seiko in their hand. On top of the Seiko, I'd put a white piece of paper. Then they put the Ligero on, and I'd put a green piece of paper. Then they put the Allure on, and I'd put a blue piece of paper, and then we'd roll it. And they're looking at my friend going, yo, where the hell did you get this white man from?
Yeah.
They're like, yo, where did you get this gringo from, you know? And they're like, yo, just listen, do what the man asks, please. And the reason I did it is when the cigars were rolled, I would then cut them in quarters. And I would look at the cross-sectional patterns, and I would look to see how the colored pieces of paper were folded in there. And we did that with every different type of roll. We did accordion, we did endubado. There's a roll down here they call the Dominican open leaf roll, right? Because the two things affect airflow in a cigar in the draw. One is the pattern of the cigar, like the cross-sectional pattern, because you need those empty honeycombs, and two is the amount of tobacco. So once I basically, I used my engineering skills, but to me it was really intuition, right? It's kind of a curse, because sometimes my intuition tells me something, and everybody looks at you like I'm nuts, you know. But once we figured out the weight of the cigar and the draw, that's when I started blending different leaves. And then all of a sudden, everything started to come together. And what I realized is that the true flavor of a cigar is accentuated by air, because air carries flavor.
True.
Okay,
true.
So when you have a cigar that's very tight, it has a tendency to be not strong, not like a heavy like nicotine strength. But what happens is when the cigar is really tight, your tobacco concentration to air ratio is very high. But when you introduce more air to that cigar, and you bring that tobacco to air ratio lower, it changes the whole flavor of the cigar, because now you're actually getting the layers of smoke coming through the cigar, aerating the cigar, and it helps accentuate the flavors. And so what happened was I had the idea for starting the company, but I just wanted to blend cigars, man. I wanted to figure this out. And what happened was I started coming back to Philadelphia, and I started handing a lot of my friends who are cigar aficionados and some connoisseurs. They're like, yo, where the hell did you get these cigars? I'm like, what do you mean? They go, these things are phenomenal. I'm like, well, they're mine. They're like, get out of here. What are you talking about? And I'm like, yeah, man, these are my cigars. And that's basically what put the idea in my head. And I said, you know what? All right, I got this. Now I need to figure out where I'm going to go from a marketing perspective. And so my pet peeve outside of the tight draw and the crooked burn and all that stuff is you see all these cigars that have all these paper bands, right? And
Always.
Some of them are magnificent looking. And the amount of time and effort that it takes to make these bands, and then they're like gold embossed, and they're pressed, and they're made. I think the major company that does a lot of these paper bands is in Sweden, which is like the legit company. But now there's other companies like Dominican, I think Nicaragua, and everybody has some of these actual printing presses that make these embossed labels and things. I thought it was like blasphemy that, you know, one of the most identifiable aspects of a cigar is the label itself. But yet when you're done smoking a cigar, you rip it off and everybody's putting it in the ashtray.
Hello everybody out there in Smoke World. Trust you enjoyed the cigars. But listen, can I interrupt for just a moment? Introduce you to Dr. Kurt Ross. If you heard, call Kurt. If you hurt, call Kurt. And then you find yourself in a car accident, slip and fall. It's time to call Kurt. When you hurt, call Kurt. 302-332-1932. 302-332-1932. Smoke World. Enjoy the cigars. But remember, when you hurt, call Kurt.
So I was like, I had an idea for the metal bands. And I'm like, but if I do this, I need to make the marketing spectacular. And I also wanted to make sure that whatever I did, it was simple but elegant, right? Because we live in such a complicated world. I think we all forget how powerful simplicity is. And that's basically how I came up with it, man. So I came up with these metal bands. Two of them are etched engraved. And then I'm like, okay, then I have these vaults. We don't call them boxes, we call them vaults. And I had those made, and they have 13 layers of clear coat on them. They have gold corner feet. I mean, they're truly awesome looking. And so now I'm like, okay, I had this amazing presentation. Now I need to make sure that cigars are up to the task, right? Because I knew that when I decided to put my foot on the gas to really push forward with Vicente Blends, I wanted to make sure that, well, number one, I knew there was going to be skepticism because I decided to go in and present with all the heavyweights of the industry, right? Because of the price point of the cigar and everything. So I really had to make sure that the engineering of the cigar was spot on. I had to make sure that the flavors were spot on. I had to make sure that everything was spot on because I knew there would be skepticism. Well, this guy's company's going up against the Fuentes and the Davidoffs and the Padrones of the world, and to me that's a challenge, right? I don't want to do something just to get by. This is truly a passion project for me. This isn't about my survival. This was just something that I wanted to create. I wanted to create what I felt the perfect cigar should be. So, and that's where we are today.
All right, so that's a good segue. So how do you compete with those big name brands? You're being a new company.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's going to be a fight there because.
Yeah, definitely. So, so let me tell you the business methodology or strategy of why I chose to do that. Right? So there are approximately 20,000 brands in the world of cigars. I might be off a few thousand high, a few thousand low. I've heard 10,000, 15,000, 25,000. So for just hypothetically argumentative sake. So if there's 20,000 brands in the world, there's only about 50 that have a cigar over $40, right? So putting aside my capabilities, putting aside the actual cigars themselves, from a visibility perspective, I said, you know what? It's much easier to get the visibility going to the top 50 and being one of those 50 than it is to be in the top 80% of the other 20,000 cigars, which means I'm still fighting with 1,600 different brands and it's too crowded for me. So that's ultimately the business, that's the strategic reason of why I decided to do what I did. Now, as for competing with them, I mean, we've only been on Instagram for about 2 months. We're up to about 700 followers, which the irony of my life is I'm a techie and this is the first social media account I've ever had in my life, right? So I don't know if 700 followers in 2 months is good or bad. I can say that before we went on Instagram, we've been selling our cigars to a bunch of private clientele. And my original idea was not to go public to the industry. My original idea was to stay private and sell to private clientele, right? And the reason for that is you have... anything in life, everybody has price points, right? Some people won't spend under X amount of dollars for shoes or purses or something, watches, jeans. Everybody has this specific level of price point. So I thought to myself, well, even though the consumers that can afford $40 cigar, they're basically a minority within the industry. However, I thought that if I'm able to deliver on presentation and quality, I'm giving that small minority a breath of fresh air by offering them a new brand.
Now, okay, I got to ask this question there, brother.
Sure.
Okay, because you're soliciting to the big boys, because for folks who don't know no better, my listeners, they're not familiar with the price point. You mentioned $40. So it's $40 per cigar. But you don't? Do you sell singles, or is it only in the 4-pack?
Not yet. We're selling a 4-pack. We call the aficionado tasting menu, so you can get one of each. Because I wanted to make it more budget friendly. However, I just made a decision yesterday that I think we're going to get single pack little boxes made, and we may start selling single packs to anybody who wants to buy them from our website.
Well, now, would that be the same price point, or does that box now raise the price?
No, it's the same.
Okay.
Yeah, and that $42 will include shipping and things like that. So, I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to at least try one.
Gotcha. So I got to ask this question in reference to your target audience in the beginning. You're thinking, sure, you're sticking with the ballers. Let's just keep it real. You going after ballers. Everybody Correct. Can't afford a $40 cigar. Whether they can afford it maybe, or are they going to smoke it on a regular basis?
Yep.
So you must be rolling in a circle where you have, the Rick Rosses, the Jay-Z's, because a
Yeah, but
$4 cigar. Oh,
Kev, there's a lot of people out there that are smoking 40, 50, 60, 80, $100 cigars, right?
yeah, that ain't me.
And
Oh, man.
let me tell you what helped me, right? So what I found is we would find specific patrons that would try the cigars. They would buy them. All of a sudden, they would have a party at their house. They would buy 4 boxes. They would have this party, kind of showing it off. And then all of a sudden, we get 5 or 6 more patrons that were at that party, that were having parties. They wanted to buy boxes. And that's how we basically originally started. It was just by word of mouth,
Okay.
And yes, these particular patrons are of a higher economic level, right? And then what happened was, about 6 months ago, I guess, most Cubans basically doubled in price. So there is a tremendous amount of Americans that smoke Cuban cigars, and they're spending $30 to $60, $70 a stick, right?
True.
Well, now all of a sudden, Cuba practically doubled the cigars. Now all of a sudden, it created this vacuum around the $40 price point, where people that are spending $40, $50 cigar, they don't want to spend $70, $80, $90 for a cigar. Now all of a sudden, that gave us some exposure, and now we're starting to get a lot of people that have been smoking Cubans starting to buy our product.
I like the concept.
And listen, man, I wish I was intelligent enough to specifically pinpoint that. That was just luck, right? Sometimes when you do the right thing in business and you grind, the definition of luck is when opportunity meets preparedness, right? That was luck. That situation happening was luck for me. And it just started to kind of roll. We're still getting private patrons here and there. I mean, we've had some of our private patrons, they didn't want me to go public on Instagram, right? Because they wanted that exclusivity. But I had too many people trying the cigar saying, Vince, you got to get this out to the public. You got to show everybody what you're doing. And then that's what I decided to do. And to be honest with you, if it wasn't for me going public and starting to show everything, I would have never created our 4-course tasting menu, or I would never even thought about making boxes. I have these amazing little like glossy paper boxes with a holder in them that we can put one cigar in and ship them, right? And that's the beauty. That was the beauty of taking it public, because now once the public patrons are focused on a product, and I have to tell you, man, the cigar community has been absolutely outrageously accommodating, showing love.
Nice.
I mean, I'll tell you, I was scared to death. 2 weeks before I went on Instagram, I flew back to Philly, and I walked in my office, and I looked at my brothers. I said, I'm fucking out. They're like, what do you mean? I said, burn the boxes. I don't give a shit about the cigars. I'm fucking out. Because my anxiety and stress was so high going to show it publicly, because I'm not a public-facing person, right? I've always been that guy that walks to the corner of the bar, sits in the back, and just sits there alone. Not that I'm like antisocial, but I'm kind of like an introvert until I meet someone and I feel someone's energy, and then I'm good,
Gotcha.
And the pressure, man, the pressure of going live on Instagram and not knowing how to handle the application, and oh my God, who's going to take the photos and all this other crazy shit. And then finally, I'm like, all right, you know what? Get over your demons, you sissy, and just get it done. and that's where we are. That's where we are today.
Well, I've been watching, brother. You've been doing a good job, so you
Cool.
got it.
Thank you.
It seems like you've been doing this for a long time. So now, if someone's interested, you won't be putting these in stores. This is strictly going to be online.
So here's the one thing I underestimated, right? We are slowly going to be rolling out to certain retail shops, right? So we have one shop in Connecticut called Night Cigar Lounge. We have another shop in Pittsburgh called Stogie Birds. And we've been vetting other brick and mortar places. But it's rolling out very slow. And the reason we're doing this is because going public, the one thing that I truly underestimated is the necessity for someone, because of the price point, to spend on one cigar rather than four in the event they don't like it. And that was something that I grossly underestimated.
Okay.
And listen, business is about adjusting, right? Whenever you have a business, you have a philosophy, you have a road path. But if you're not dynamic in that road path on how to get to the end, you're going to go down, you know? Now, luckily, we have some private clientele and things like that, so it made life easier. But I found myself saying, you know what? I want everybody that can experience it, I want them to experience it. And that's when I realized that I totally underestimated my philosophy about brick and mortar retail. And that's been probably about 30 days old, that philosophy or that thought process. So now we're starting, people in certain areas, they're like, hey, Vince, there's a cigar lounge here that, we think your cigars would do great. I'm like, okay, listen, if you can help me make the contact, great. We'll try to get a box out there and we'll see how see how things progress. So that's basically where we are at the moment.
Okay, so let's talk about the blends. What blends do you have so far?
Okay. So first off, we only blend Toro sizes. Okay? So the other thing that we've done different in the industry is most cigar manufacturers, they'll make one blend and they'll make 5 different sizes. Okay? The reason they do that is because they want to get the largest demographic of consumer as they can, because not everybody likes a Toro. Some people like Robustos, some people like Petite Coronas and Lanceros and things like that. The problem with that is, even though it's the same blend on a Robusto, it winds up being different blends for all the different size cigars, because cross-sectional patterns are different, circumference areas are different. So I also believe the Toro provides the perfect amount of tobacco concentration to airflow. So I took a different stance. I made 4 Toros, all of different blends, because I had the construction down and I wanted to truly make 4 different blends. So with that being said, I have 2 blends that are Dominican Puros. And for anybody listening, if they don't know what a Puro is, a Puro means that all the leaves of that cigar are indigenous to one country.
Right.
So I have the Gold Standard V and the Palladium V. They're 2 Dominican Puros. The Gold Standard V has a Dominican Criollo wrapper. The Palladium V has a Havana 2000 Dominican wrapper, and they both have Dominican binders, but they're a little bit different, right? And those 2 cigars have a whole different flavor profile. So the Gold Standard is very Cubanesque. It's very buttery, nutty. You get a little bit of espresso in there. I've gotten all kinds of flavor profiles. The Palladium has a little bit of woodiness in there. It has some spices, like some people said exotic spices, like baking spices. There's a little bit of hint of sweetness in there. I've had a couple people tell me there's some molasses in there.
Okay.
So they're the 2 Dominican Puros. Then I have 2 other cigars. Now, I'm sorry, those Dominican Puros are part of our Precious Blends line, right? The reason I called them Precious Blends is because since the tobacco is indigenous to one country, I wanted to create the symbolism between the Gold Standard, and that's a polished gold ring with etched engraving, and the other one is called the Palladium, and that's a polished stainless steel with etched engraving. So there's symbolism between the name of the line, the name of the cigars, and the tobacco. The other line that we have is called the Royalty line. They're the rings that actually look like king's crown rings. One is called the Crown of Honor. That has a gold king's crown ring with rubies in it. That blend is Dominican filler, a Nicaraguan binder, and U.S. Connecticut wrapper. A lot of people are starting to call that cigar the New World Cuban, because when they smoke that, they're like, this is just like the Cubans that I used to smoke. And that, I didn't do that intentionally, man. That, like I'm not, to be honest with you, I don't necessarily like the word Cubanesque. I think too many people try to mimic Cuba, and the flavors and everything just because it sells.
Right.
But, that's it's just the way that the market is taking that particular cigar. So that cigar has a nutty base. There's some white pepper in there, a little bit of apricot some people get different types of citrus. Somebody was telling me they were getting some kind of like candied almonds and things like that. And the beauty of it is everybody has a different flavor palette for the same cigar, right? You might like salmon. I may not like salmon. It doesn't mean the salmon's bad, right? True. It's just everybody has their own flavor palette. So that's called the Honor. The other cigar of the royalty line is called Crown of War. That's a black crown with blue crystals. That is Dominican filler. That's a Nicaraguan binder, and that's in a Cameroon wrapper. That cigar is so all four cigars are medium in strength, but that War is medium in strength, but it's also kind of a deeper flavor profile where people are getting chocolate. I've gotten a little bit like hints of cherry. There's some espresso, a little bit of creaminess in there. And yeah, man, so they're basically the four blends.
All right. So now you started this whole process from starting at 60. What does the future look like? What are you thinking about doing? Are you thinking about making something for the, let's say, average smoker in price, or you're just kind of heading this direction and you're just going to see how far this right now can take you?
Yeah, so I've been getting a lot of those questions, right? And here's the one thing that we decided to do to try to make it more affordable. So if you buy a full box, which is $420, they're actually $42 a stick, right? If you buy a full box, you then qualify to buy naked cigars at $35 because nobody's throwing our boxes out, nobody's throwing the rings out. So if you buy your first box for $420, you then have the ability to buy 10 additional cigars that are naked for $350. Then what people are doing, they're reloading their box with the cigars and putting the rings on them because a lot of people use the cigars as like a showpiece.
Gotcha.
So that's the first thing. And listen, $350 still, may not be affordable. I have gotten a lot of questions about if I can make, a $20 cigar, $25 cigar, maybe like a Robusto or a Torpedo or something. And I don't know what the future holds, right? It's it's an idea that I have for the future, and I know that there's a desire there. But I think the one thing that a lot of manufacturers do, I think they make too many cigars at one shot. And I think it really waters down their vision and their brand. And I mean, I know of a handful of cigar companies that basically failed because all of a sudden they put like 15 cigars out.
That's very true. That's very true.
Because they just, they get addicted to the blending and doing all these different things, and your creativity takes over. And so, I have blended smaller cigars. However, the flavors are a lot harder to blend with smaller cigars simply because, excuse me, I'm so used to the airflow and everything. It's going to take me months to figure out how to do what I did in a smaller gauge cigar that's more affordable.
Okay, so now just to get some clarity on if they buy a box at the $425 price point, you're saying they can then get the naked cigar. Do they have to do that right then and at that point in time, or they can wait?
No. Once you buy a box, you then qualify to buy the naked cigars within like the next 6 months.
Okay.
Right? We haven't made an actual requirement yet, but there probably will be some kind of requirement where if you want to qualify for buying the naked cigars, you probably have to buy like 10 every 6 months or something like that, or 10 every 12 months.
Okay.
Something to just make sure that you're going to continually buy them at some type of frequency. I just don't know what that frequency is yet.
Okay, as far as the time frame. Okay, not a problem there. Not a problem there. Now, I got to ask this quick question because you kind of broke everything down. I didn't need to ask anything. I love this. So, the gold rings, what was the concept? I know you mentioned the bands, but what made you go with that? Does that really affect the price point as far as what do you have to charge for that cigar?
No. No, because we're getting them in a decent amount of quality where, you know, the first thing I was afraid of were people are like, oh, well, they're $42 because of the rings, right? The rings are not that expensive. Now, we've made concept rings with gold like real 18 karat gold, like diamond encrusted that are like $1,200, right? Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, but, you know, you have some people that want like their own custom ring, you know?
That's a Saudi princess. That's a Saudis, man. Come on, bro.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the reasons why the cigars are as expensive as they are is because it's the way that we roll them. Okay, let's just take a $20 cigar on the market today, right? That manufacturer that's producing that $20 cigar, they're rolling 300 of them a day, which is a lot for a two-man team or two-person team, whether it's male or female. Okay? We are only rolling 120 a day. And here's the reason why. Those gold rings, or any of the rings that we have, we only have a 0.25 millimeter tolerance for the diameter of the cigar to fit properly in the ring. So all these other manufacturers, they press the cigars for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. They pull them out. They put the wrappers on them. And then the next day they're boxing them, they're shipping them out, right? They don't necessarily have to worry about the tolerance we are because they're putting paper bands on them. And if you know the paper bands, they always overlap by like a centimeter or so, right?
Yes.
So what we do is we have to make sure that the filler is drier than normal because we're pressing the cigars for so long. We have to make sure that the filler has the ability to expand while it's in the press, which is the exact opposite of what everybody else does. So hypothetically, let's think about this. If you have and the most expensive thing on a cigar is the labor.
True.
Right? So if you have a $20 cigar and they're rolling 300 a day per team, and all of a sudden that production goes down to 120 because there's more quality measures taken into place, you just cut production by 60%, which ultimately means the price goes up by 200%, right?
Yeah.
So that $20 cigar could potentially now be a $60 cigar.
Okay.
Right? So, you know, our cost of labor is a lot higher doing what we're doing for the reasons that I want. Now, granted, the boxes, the rings, yes, they add to the cost, but not as much as people would think.
Okay. That's, you know, because that's going to be a number one question for folks. Like, wow, Stone, cigars are really expensive. And you broke it down, Vince. You broke it down on the reason why and the quality. So this is what I love about guests like yourself. I don't have to ask a lot of questions. You went into a whole dialogue and said, hey, this is why we do what we do, how, when. So I love that. I love that part. I love it.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
So, okay, brother. I had my little notes here. I didn't even need them. I didn't even need my notes. I love this. I didn't need it. So I will ask you this last question.
Sure.
Based on everything you told us, now is there anything that maybe I didn't get to, because again, you got to a lot of stuff and I love it, that you want the folks to know about your particular blends, where they can find them, and first of all, after you answer that, then you're going to give me the information and let the folks know where they can find you online, social media,
sure,
all that, so they can reach out and connect. They're thinking, I need to try one of these. Even at this price point, now you got them curious. So this is what we
perfect.
want. This is what we want.
Instagram, it's at Vicente Blends. It's Vicent. It's not Vincente. It's Vic. Vicente Blends. The website is vicenteblends.com. And when you see, when everybody goes onto the website, it's a totally unique website. There's a lot of information. I don't go into like our cigar pedigree and our family and our leads and all this other garbage that I don't think the normal consumer really cares about. I went deep into the reasons why I did what I did from an engineering perspective, from a business methodology perspective. So we have been getting a lot of compliments on the website. Everything can be bought on the website. You just have to kind of, I used very different terms. I think it's called like the acquisition, and then you go to the acquisition, and there's the humidor or the masterpieces. I forget. I've changed it so many times.
The acquisition is right. You've got some fancy words up there, brother. We know you went to some school of higher education.
Yeah, well, I wanted to make it different so people would look at it and say, "Man, this is different." Yeah. Right? Like I didn't want to put storefront or what the other 20,000 brands do. I really just wanted to make it different so people could actually spend time and look at it, right? So yeah, I mean, right now that's where you can buy them.
Are you shipping international or just right now domestic?
Yeah, man, but shipping international is a pain.
Okay.
It's a pain right now because we're only using USPS, right? So we've shipped the cigars to Qatar, Dubai, Germany, Poland, UK, Canada. Canada's brutal, man. Like Canada is like freaking brutal. Like I don't want to ship to Canada anymore. I don't think, like, being an American, we have no idea how easy it is to get cigars and have shipping within the U.S. And it is a nightmare trying to ship internationally, man.
That's right.
So here's the crazy thing. So the only carriers that you can use in the U.S. is USPS or UPS. DHL and FedEx, you're not permitted to ship tobacco. So we use UPS for in the U.S. We ship out 3-day priority. That seems to be the best because USPS seems to be bipolar sometimes. Like one day it fucking gets there in Arizona in like 20 hours, and to go to New Jersey it's like 5 days. You're like, what the hell is going on right now, right? We're trying to get UPS set up for international shipments, but we literally have to provide our business license an EIN number and everything to UPS in order for them to approve it, and we've been waiting like 20 days. It's insane.
That's crazy.
Like, it's totally freaking insane.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So.
Welcome to that world. That's a whole nother world, other cigar world.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You didn't think about that. Like, damn, I got to do all this to ship the damn thing?
The import taxes are outrageous, like totally outrageous in Europe. It's unbelievable. It's sometimes the import tax is 200%.
Wow. Damn.
Yeah. Listen, the average, I don't know if I read this or I heard this from someone. The average cost of a cigar in Germany is like $80. $80, man.
What the hell? Okay.
I mean, it's crazy. It's literally, and you look around and you're like, yo, like, what is going on? Like, everybody's legalizing weed and all this other crazy shit.
Right, that's a whole nother game, brother.
Yeah, man. I'm not a political person, but now that I'm in the cigar industry, I'm starting to look around going, why is everybody picking on cigars? Like, this is crazy. Why are the politicians so fixated on it?
That's another question.
Yeah. And I don't.
Yeah. That's a whole nother. That's a different episode. That's a different. That's a different podcast. Trust me. That's a different podcast. We could talk about that for days. Like, wait, the weed is cool. Everything's weed is good, but cigar is bad. I thought this was a legal product. But hey, what do we know? What do we know, brother? What do we know? Phew. Well, look, brother, my man, I appreciate you, Vince. You broke us down.
Here. Thank you.
Vince has really broken us down because it was a beautiful thing. Didn't have to go through a whole bunch of notes because Vince handled his business. Again, Vince, thanks for being a guest on Smoke World. All right, folks, well, there you have it. Another episode of what? Smoke World in the books. You can follow me on Instagram at Smoke World Podcast. The email, stone at smokeworldpodcast.com and the website, folks, smokeworldpodcast.com. Listen, as always, thank you for listening. And don't forget, tell your friends. They want to know about the product too. Don't be stingy with the information. Tell your friends, your cousins, your aunts, your uncles. You know. Okay? We will check you out on the other side, people. Peace.